The Night Shift. 4. Iris Calloway had photographed the dead before. She had done it for money, mostly. A grim little side hustle she had picked up during the lean years after art school, when the galleries stopped returning her emails and her landlord stopped accepting, "I'm working on it." A funeral home in Bay Ridge had hired her to take portraits of the deceased in their caskets for families who needed something to send to relatives overseas. The work paid $60 a body. Iris had learned in those years that the dead were not frightening. The dead were only quiet. It was the living, with their grief and their gathering, and their need for the photograph to mean something, who unsettled her. She had not photographed anyone in 8 months when the job listing appeared on Craigslist. Overnight security. Museum position. Must be comfortable working alone. $28 at HR. Apply in person. The Hartmann Institute and Medical History, 447 West 19th Street, Iris, had never heard of the Hartmann Institute. This struck her later as the first strange thing. She had lived in the city for 14 years, and she walked everywhere, and she had a photographer's memory for buildings. But the address, when she looked it up, was real. A narrow brownstone between a parking garage and a shuttered Greek diner, with a small brass plaque beside the door that she must have passed 100 times without seeing. She put on the only blazer she owned and walked there in the rain. The man who interviewed her was named Mr. Voss. He was perhaps 70, perhaps older, with hands so pale and well kept that they looked as though they had been carved from soap. He did not ask about her experience. He did not ask about her references. He asked her one question. "Miss Calloway, have you ever felt, looking at a photograph of a stranger, that the photograph was looking back?" Iris thought about it. "Yes," she said, "when I worked at the funeral home. Sometimes." Mr. Voss smiled, with his lower face only. His eyes did not change. "You'll do." The Hartmann Institute had been founded in 1841 by a Prussian physician named Friedrich Hartmann, who had emigrated to New York after a scandal in Vienna that Mr. Voss did not specify. The institute housed, on its 4 narrow floors, the largest collection of medical wax models in North America. Over 600 figures depicting every disease, deformity, surgical case, and famous patient of the 18th and 19th centuries. The models were exquisite. Iris understood this within minutes of walking the floors. They were not the crude, lumpy things she had imagined when Mr. Voss said wax. They were people. The skin had pores. The eyes had vessels. The hair, God, the hair was real human hair, sewn strand by strand into the wax scalps by craftsmen who had taken decades to learn the work. A woman with advanced syphilis lay in a glass case on the 2nd floor. Her face caved softly inward, and her mouth was so faintly parted that Iris could see the inside of her lower lip. "They were made," Mr. Voss said, walking her through, "from the patients themselves. Sittings of many hours, some of them weeks. The Institute's founder believed that the wax retained, how shall I say, a fidelity to the original that no photograph could match." He gestured to a young man in Gallery 3, propped half-sitting against a velvet cushion, his abdomen open in cross-section to display a series of tumors the color of plums. "Mr. Aldous Penhaligon," Mr. Voss said, with a small, fond air, as if introducing an old friend. "Died in 1864. He sat for the artists for 9 weeks before he passed. He was, by all accounts, a charming young man." Iris looked at Mr. Penhaligon. Mr. Penhaligon looked very faintly back. "Your duties," Voss continued, moving on, "are simple. You will walk the 4 floors every 2 hours. You will note any irregularities in a journal kept in the security office. You will not, under any circumstances, touch the figures. You will not enter the cases. You will not photograph the collection." He paused at the top of the stairs and turned to her. "And Miss Calloway, if you should notice that a figure has moved, you will not approach it. You will return to the security office. You will write it in the journal. You will wait until morning." Iris waited for him to say he was joking. He did not. The first 3 nights, nothing moved. Iris walked her rounds. She drank coffee from a thermos in the small wood-paneled security office on the ground floor. She read on her phone. The Institute was quiet in the way only very old buildings are quiet. A quiet that had weight, that pressed in on the ears, that made every small creak of settling timber sound like an announcement. The figures stood, sat, lay, and reclined in their glass cases, as they had stood and sat and lain and reclined for 180 years. Iris began, by the 2nd night, to think of them by name. She had stolen the master catalogue from the office and read it cover to cover. Mr. Penhaligon in Gallery 3, Mrs. Adelheid Boa, a goiter case from 1857, in Gallery 5. The twins, conjoined sisters who had lived to 19, in the small alcove off the 2nd floor landing. Master Thomas Greaves, a boy of perhaps 11 with advanced rickets, in a velvet-lined case by the south stairwell. She found that she liked them. They were beautifully made. They had been beautifully loved. She found also that they liked being looked at. She could not have explained this, and she would not have said it aloud. But there was a particular quality to the air in the galleries. When she stopped at a case and read the brass placard and attended to the figure, when she met its painted eyes and let herself, for a moment, see the person it had been, the wax seemed to relax. The air grew warmer by a degree. She felt sometimes that the figures were exhaling. She was a photographer. She knew when a subject was glad to be seen. On the 4th night, Mr. Penhaligon was facing the other way. Iris had walked Gallery 3 at midnight, and Mr. Penhaligon had been propped half-sitting against his velvet cushion, his open abdomen presented to the visitor's side of the case as it had been presented for 160 years. At 2 a.m., she walked Gallery 3 again, and Mr. Penhaligon was facing the back wall, his tumored abdomen pressed against the glass behind him. The velvet cushion was where it had been. The case was sealed. The dust on the floor of the case was undisturbed. He had simply turned in his glass coffin, like a sleeper turning in bed. Iris stood in front of the case for what may have been a full minute. She did not, she would say later, feel afraid. She felt attended to. She felt the way she had felt sometimes in the funeral home, when she lowered her camera and a body seemed just for an instant to be aware of her. She went back to the office. She opened the journal. She wrote, 2:14 a.m. Mr. Penhaligon, Gallery 3, facing the rear wall. No other irregularities. When she returned at 4 a.m., he was facing forward again. The dust in the case had not been disturbed. In the morning, when Mr. Voss came to relieve her, he read the journal entry without comment. Then he closed the book, and he looked at her with his unsmiling eyes, and he said, "He likes you." Iris waited. Aldous was a great flirt in life, Mr. Voss said. He had a particular weakness for women who looked at him kindly. You have been looking at him kindly, Miss Calloway. Mr. Voss, she said carefully. I think there's something wrong with the case. Mr. Voss tilted his head. The morning light caught his pale, soap-carved hands where they rested on the desk. There is nothing wrong with the case, my dear. The case has functioned perfectly for 160 years. What you noticed last night is what every night watch eventually notices. It is part of the position. Continue your rounds. Continue your journal. Do not approach the figures. You are doing very well. He smiled with the lower half of his face only. Aldous is glad of the company. By the end of the second week, 4 figures had moved. Mr. Penhaligon turned in his case once or twice a night, always to face her when she entered the gallery. Mrs. Bauer had begun, very subtly, to lift her chin. Iris watched it happen over the course of 3 nights, the goiter slowly lengthening into view, as if the wax woman were trying to swallow. Master Thomas Greaves, the rickets boy, had moved his small, twisted hand from his lap to the glass of his case. He palm pressed flat against the inside of the panel, the way a child presses a palm against a car window. He left no smudge. He left no print. But every night, when she entered the gallery, his hand was on the glass. The conjoined sisters, the twins, had begun to turn their heads toward the gallery door whenever she opened it. Iris recorded all of it. The journal began to fill. She wrote in a tight, controlled hand, the way she had written field notes in art school, and she found that the writing was, itself, a kind of comfort. The figures were behaving. She was watching. There was a protocol, and she was following it. The protocol said, "Do not approach approach. She did not approach. But she had begun, in the long, quiet hours between rounds, to talk to them. She did it quietly, almost to herself. She would stop in front of Mrs. Bauer's case and say, "Good evening, Adelheid. I hope you're comfortable tonight." She would pause at the twins' alcove and say, "Hello, girls. I read about your father in the catalogue. He sounds like he loved you very much." She would stand for a long time in front of Master Thomas Greaves, and she would tell him about her own childhood, the things she remembered, the things she missed. He never moved his hand from the glass. The air in the galleries grew warmer. The figures grew patient. She felt, more and more, that the Institute was listening. On the 17th night, she found the journals. Not the official journal kept in the security office. Other journals. A stack of them, perhaps 30, in a cabinet at the back of the office that she had assumed was locked, but which, on the 17th night, was not. They were the night watch journals of every guard who had worked the Institute before her, going back to 1903. She read them in order. She read all of them. It took her most of the shift. The handwriting changed. The paper aged. The names of the watchmen rotated through. Carl, Edward, Beatrice, Solomon, James, Margaret, on and on through the decades. But the entries were the same. Mr. Penhaligon facing the rear wall. Mrs. Bauer's chin lifted 3 degrees. Master Greaves's hand on the glass. The last journal in the stack was dated this year. It belonged to a man named Hector Acuna, who had been the night watchman immediately before her. His entries began like all the others, methodical, careful. Mr. Penhaligon turned 2:14 a.m. But by the 3rd week, his handwriting had begun to change, to grow looser, fonder, less professional. He had begun, like her, to call the figures by their first names. He had begun to write longer entries. He had begun, in the 5th week, to describe his conversations with them. Hardus told me about his sister tonight. She lived in Vermont. He had not seen her in 3 years before he sat for the artists. He says he forgives her for not coming to see him at the end. Adelheid sang for me tonight. She was a contralto in Bavaria before her illness. Her voice is just as it was. The wax remembers. Thomas wants me to take him home. Iris turned the page. The next entry, dated 2 months ago, was the last entry in the book. The handwriting was very steady. The ink was very dark. It read, "I have agreed. Mr. Voss says it is a great honor. He says only one of us has ever refused in the entire history of the Institute, and that man was unhappy for the rest of his life. I do not wish to be unhappy. I have come to love them very much. Tomorrow I will sit for the artists. They have asked for 9 weeks. Aldous has promised to keep me company. The case beside his is already prepared." Iris closed the journal. She sat in the security office for a long time, breathing, her hands flat on the desk. Then she stood up and she walked the 4 floors of the Hartmann Institute one more time. Gallery 3. Mr. Penhaligon was facing forward in his case, the way he should have been. But beside him, in a case she had walked past 40 times in 17 nights and somehow never quite seen, was the wax figure of a man in his middle 40s, of Latin American features, wearing a security guard's blue uniform. His name placard read, Hector Acuna, Night Watch, Anno 2026. His left hand was raised in a small wave. His eyes were painted with extraordinary care. He looked, Iris thought, as though he had been very loved by the artists who had made him. He looked also as though he were very glad to be seen. Iris stood in front of his case for a long time. Then she walked to the case on the other side of Mr. Penhaligon, a case she had never seen filled in 17 nights of rounds. The case was empty. The velvet cushion was new. The brass placard, freshly polished, was blank. Above the case, in pencil, in a small, careful hand she recognized from the morning desk, someone had written a single name and a single year. Iris Calloway. The doll, after the year, was waiting. The dash, after the year, was waiting. She did not run. She thought she would. She thought in the long seconds after she read her own name on the placard that her body would do what bodies are supposed to do. Bolt for the door, scream into her phone for the police, call her sister in Albany, anything. But her body did not move. Her body stood in front of the empty case, and she felt, and this was the worst part, the part she would never afterward be able to explain. She felt the warm air of the gallery move around her, and she felt the attention of the figures behind her, all of them, in all 4 floors of the Institute, turning very slowly toward her in their cases. The twins were watching her from their alcove. Mrs. Bauer's chin had lifted. Master Thomas Greaves had pressed his small, twisted hand against the glass of his case and was leaning, very slightly, toward her. Mr. Penhaligon, in the case to her right, was smiling. The wax did not move. The face did not change, but the smile was there. She had not seen it before, because it had not been there before. It was a small, fond smile. The smile of a charming young man of 1864 who had been waiting 160 years for someone to see him. "You have been so kind to us," the smile said. Not in words, in the air, in the temperature of the room. "You have been kinder than any of them. You have come to us every night. You have learned our names. You have spoken to us. You have looked at us the way the artists looked at us, the way only the artists ever looked at us, the way we have not been looked at in a very long time. You understand what we are. We have been seen for 180 years, and being seen is the only thing that keeps us from disappearing. And we are so tired, Iris. We are so tired of holding on alone. Stay with us. Be looked at with us. The cases are very small, but the seeing is forever." Gower stood in front of her empty case. She thought of her apartment in Bushwick, 400 square feet, the rent 2 months overdue. She thought of her sister, who had not called her in a year. She thought of the gallery in Chelsea that had stopped returning her emails in 2019. She thought of the funeral home in Bay Ridge, the bodies in their caskets, the families holding the photographs that would be all that remained of the dead in another generation. And then, nothing. The photographs lost, the names forgotten, the dead disappearing for the second and final time. She thought of being looked at. She thought of being looked at forever. The artists, Mr. Voss had said, took 9 weeks. In the morning, Mr. Voss arrived at 6. He carried with him a thermos of strong coffee and a small leather folio. He found Iris Calloway sitting in the security office, the journal closed on the desk in front of her, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I have read Mr. Acuna's journal," she said. "Yes," said Mr. Voss. "I rather thought you might." There was a long quiet between them. "How does it work?" she asked finally. "The artists begin tonight. They are very gentle. They have done this for a long time." Mr. Voss set the folio on the desk. "There is paperwork, of course. There is always paperwork. Your apartment will be cleared. Your belongings will be donated. Your sister will receive a letter explaining that you have taken a position abroad and will not be returning. She will not look for you. She has not been looking for you." Iris nodded slowly, and then Mr. Voss's eyes, for the first time since she had met him, were very kind. "And then, Miss Calloway, you will be looked at every day by every visitor for as long as the Institute stands. And the Institute, I should tell you, has stood for 185 years and shows no sign of falling." He opened the folio. He uncapped a fountain pen. He set the pen beside the papers. "You understand, of course," he said, "that you may refuse. One has refused in the past. He was permitted to leave. He lived another 40 years, I believe. I have his file somewhere. He died alone in a single-room occupancy hotel in Newark, and his body was not found for 11 days. And when it was found, there was no one to claim it, and he was buried in a municipal grave that no longer has a marker." Mr. Voss smiled, very gently, with the whole of his face this time. "He was forgotten, Miss Calloway, as we are all forgotten who are not preserved." Iris looked at the pen. She looked at the papers. She thought of the empty case on the 3rd floor, with the velvet cushion and the polished placard and the small waiting dash after the year. She picked up the pen. "The Hartmann Institute of Medical History stands at 414 West 19th Street, between a parking garage and a shuttered creek diner. Admission is free. It is open to the public, Tuesday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. On the 3rd floor, in Gallery 3, there is a glass case to the left of Mr. Aldous Penhaligon. It contains the wax figure of a woman in her late 30s, dressed in a dark blazer, holding a small camera in her hands. Her hair is dark. Her eyes are painted with extraordinary care. The placard beneath the case reads, "Iris Calloway, Night Watch, Anno 2026. And the second date has not yet been filled in. She is a recent addition. The artists worked 9 weeks. They have done very fine work. If you go to see her, and you should, the admission is free, and the Institute is open 6 days a week. Please stop in front of her case for a moment. Read her placard. Mate her painted eyes. Stay long enough for her to know that you are seeing her. She has been waiting for someone to look at her. She has been waiting a long time. The case beside hers is empty. The velvet cushion is new. The brass placard above it is blank, but Frenchly polished. And the position of overnight security is, as of this writing, open. The pays $28 an hour. The hours are your own. You should apply in person.